Welcome everybody to the August 20th edition of the Chuck Jones Creativeside Chats. This evening, as you've maybe been along with us throughout the summer, we've highlighted some fantastic artists and we've gotten to go inside their studios, get to know them better, their artwork better, and had just some great conversations. And tonight is certainly no exception. If you've seen his work, you instantly know whose artwork that is on the wall. And it has been an absolute pleasure to get to know this young man who's, I'm not exactly sure how old you are, man, but I'm going to just go with you might be younger than me, even though your beard is more righteous than mine. And so tonight we have the distinct pleasure of being in the studio of Mr. Michael Summers. And like I've said before, Michael, how are you? Welcome to the Chuck Jones Creativeside Chat.
Thanks for having me. It's a lot of fun to get to do this.
So we got to nerd out a little bit when we got to know each other a couple of days ago, and I got to know you a little bit better, your artwork, and just kind of all those inspirations. And one thing I love about these Chuck Jones Creativeside Chats is there's everybody that we've had has been influenced by Chuck in some way. And what I wanted to do tonight, as we get to know you and your artwork, and we get to see some amazing things that you're going to present. What was, when we talk about Chuck and that influence, I know you had mentioned from like when you were a child, right? There was already a mark. Chuck left a mark on you. Could you go into that a little bit of how that happened, like that moment where you're like Chuck Jones?
Yeah, absolutely. Chuck Jones is the first artist that I remember actually being aware of. You know, as my artwork is heavily inspired by pop art, cartoons, and comic books, and that inspiration came from when I was very young, waking up, watching Saturday morning cartoons, and my favorite was generally Looney Tunes, and I remember, I don't know, I must have been about 6, maybe 7 years old when I started realizing that all of the ones that at the beginning had Chuck Jones, had that directed by Chuck Jones on it, had like a little bit of a different feel and a little bit of a different style, and I remember really gravitating towards those. And yeah, I remember thinking that I wanted to be able to create worlds the way he was able to.
So, and I love that because I share your affinity for Chuck Jones at a young age, and it only got funnier as I got older. And what I wanted to do tonight too is show, like, you've got some Chuck inspired pieces that you've done, and it's very much your distinctive style. And some of, like, from my all-time favorite films. And Scott, if you could run and just get in the preview for me. But before we do that, do you have Hold the Tiger with Bugs Bunny? Do you mind showing that piece?
Yeah, I actually have that one here, like right in the studio with me.
So I love this piece. What, and for, we've got people watching on Facebook Live, probably 20,000. Don't get nervous. We've got people on Zoom. And what I wanted to tell people as you're holding up this glorious painting, and we have a snapshot of it also that we'll show in a minute. And if you've got a question, you can go ahead in Facebook Live. You can pop a question in there. They'll feed that to us. If you're in Zoom, same thing. For Michael, here's a little tighter shot of it. So what inspired this piece with Bugs Bunny?
I mean, honestly, honestly, it was just kind of like, Bugs is definitely Chuck's most iconic character, and the Carlsbad Tigers are sort of my most iconic piece. So I just kind of wanted to combine that, and honestly, it was just me kind of like fanboying out on the opportunity to get to do this homage to Chuck's work, like in my style, and to set his version of Bugs in my world and my setting.
And I love that because I love the idea of something that you're very well known for and something that he's very well known for, and the combination of the two to get to do something. I can attest that's a geek out moment. So I think that's awesome. And I wanted it to, like, and I know it's Linda Jones, it's his daughter's favorite film, which is Robin Hood Daffy. Could we show, I think we have a still of that. Scott, could we show Robin Hood Daffy? So You know, the moments in here, yoinks and away, every time he smacks a tree, I crack up, right? You can't not. And it's probably
Right.
the best laugh sequence ever is Porky Pig in this thing. I laugh, he laughs, he ends up getting Daffy to laugh, right? What was it about this piece that you were like, I've got to paint this in my style?
Um, that was also, it's hard to pick an absolute favorite, but this is real high in the running. And like this is just a cartoon that I remember, you know, I couldn't even tell you how many times I've seen it. And like you said, every time I watch it, I'm cracking up and laughing. Um, and yeah, like kind of a nerdy aside, like I do like historic fencing, like with longsword or rapier. And anytime I mess anything up for a long time, I have this tendency to be like, dodge, spin, parry, pop, poke. Yeah, it's just stayed with me for, yeah, again, since, as long as I can remember that's been something that's inspired and just brought me joy.
And I love that because I'm in the same thing. Like you can start to recite lines, you end up start picking it up on your own, and you find yourself subconsciously reciting those. We get into like Robin Hood, Daffy, and then another all-time favorite for me, right, was Duck Dodgers. And I know like we've got, so if we show this image right here, if you're to look at Michael's stuff, it's bit.ly/Michael Summer Studio. You can take a look at all the pieces that we're going to see tonight, plus exclusive editions. And this one's not only an original, but we do have a limited edition of this, a special edition, I think of only 10, which is awesome. And Duck Dodgers, to me, the Acme disintegration gun, I mean, you name it, go down the list of things, right? And, Maurice Noble's backgrounds, the whole idea. What was it about Planet X that, I mean, you've got two Daffy pieces in here, and that's two of my top 5 favorite cartoons from Chuck. What in that Planet X for you? Just I had to do this.
That was something as soon as I'd started working with the Chuck Jones Gallery and realized, and realized that I was going to have access to actually like working with these characters. Like that was something that I knew I was going to have to tackle. like the Duck Dodgers was again one of those so massively influential. I remember loving it instantly when I was young, just because it was, funny and ray guns and Martians. And then like the older I got, like appreciated it on more levels, as it was like that whole futility of like of escalating conflict, and like there's so many layers that cartoon just continually cracked me up on. And especially that moment at the end where he's got the completely Pyrrhic victory. like it's the emptiest victory possible, but Daffy being Daffy, he's just glad that he won. It doesn't matter if he smashed it all to pieces to do it.
Absolutely. And who knew even that like something else in this film, which I still love from the beginning, would affect us in such a great and fantastic way. Again, you more righteously than me, but the shaving cream, Adam, which we don't even use, right? We don't need it. And and what I love about that, and when he introduces it, and that's the mission for this. Freaking hilarious. Now I don't do it anymore, and I did trim back. You clearly have like I said, much more righteous beard than I. But we don't need the shaving cream, Adam. So that whole trip for Duck Dodgers could have been avoided for us anyway.
Yeah, it did me no favors at all.
I've one thing I love about these creative side chats is when you get to see, it's not often, as a matter of fact, it's extremely rare that we get into another artist's studio and we get to actually see kind of where all the magic happens and what influences you have around you. And what I wanted when I was geeking out, as we were discussing on Tuesday and looking around, and I can see stuff in the background, and I'm like, ooh, what's that? And then I'm like, ooh, what's that over there? And I found it fascinating what you pull off. And I love that shot right there for a moment, if we can hold on. So in this style that you developed, you were obviously very heavily influenced by pop culture, and you know that you had mentioned, and all that went into that. What I love, and I didn't realize until you mentioned it, is that you will paint your maquettes and then light them so that you know what you're going to do for the painting. And I think that is phenomenal because I can see your characters right there on the shelf. Can you explain a little bit about that? Like, what brought that into where you're like, I mean, because essentially you have three-dimensional paintings right there.
Yeah, it's kind of a mix of a little bit of an obsessive approach to painting, like very detail oriented and very much trying to make everything as crisp and accurate as possible. And then originally it was also partially just because I hadn't painted enough yet to necessarily know how things should look just by seeing it in my head. So I decided I was going to start, if I couldn't find photo reference, then I would make the photo reference so that I made sure I had the shadows falling right, I had the light falling right, I had everything set up in the shot so that I could, you know, kind of diligently recreate my layout, and know that everything was right, not have to guess as to whether or not my light sources were accurate or not.
Which I think is awesome, and really, I mean, it applies to, you know, if we have some aspiring artists out there, and you know, it really applies to anything. Reference is key. Reference is great. It's how we learn off those things. And I think it's phenomenal that you, not only that you still do it, and you create these paintings on your three-dimensional objects, and then you go ahead and paint them again. It's like a 2-for-1. So I think I love it. I loved when you brought that stuff up. And what I love too is like you've got animals and robots, and we'll kind of get into Robo Guy and stuff like that. But I thought your explanation was hilarious, right? Of like how this evolved from where you were to where you are now. And, you know, it kind of, you take that influence that Chuck had on you when you were younger, and you get into middle school, high school, you're doing art, you're doing these things. And then you get a job at a framing shop, and really like kind of launching this Michael Summers, you know, steamroller that's coming down the tracks. Kind of, how did that start? When, you know, like everybody wonders, like, how did you get started in this whole thing? And I love your story on that. So the frame shop, how did this all come out of a frame shop?
Yeah, I had mentioned I had, you know, kind of recently finished college and wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. Like, had an art degree, which, you know, I'd always assumed, like, well, you can't make a living as an artist, but it was what I wanted to study. So I had no idea what to do with it. And this, you know, this good friend of mine had worked for this company, and he said, our company owns a frame shop. They're hiring. And I went, well, yeah, at least I'll kind of get to be around art, and I'll learn how to frame my work. So took the job, and the people who owned the company owned a gallery, and they came in one day and saw a few pieces of work that I'd been framing for myself, out of the scrap molding. And they liked my work, so they invited me to be a part of this group miniature show. I think it was about like 8 artists, and we all were painting like 6x8 or smaller paintings.
Those are tiny paintings.
Yeah, very, very, very small paintings. But you know, that attention to detail and kind of obsessive compulsive approach to painting worked for me in this instance. And yeah, so it sold really well. So they asked me if I wanted to come back and maybe show with them at some future shows. And it was kind of a slow process, but that was definitely like sort of my first into a gallery and getting to be a part of a show and participate in all that, and get my work in front of an audience.
And just like that, boom, you get your start. And which I love the fact that, because I know, you know, sometimes as an artist, as a creative, really as anybody in the field that you're in, you can have some doubt, especially when you feel passionate about something that you want to do. and maybe you're not in that path yet, you know, and it feels like a little off. And I love the fact that you had your moment and then you stepped into the moment and you made something of that, and look at what the doors that are open. I think it really applies to anything for anybody. But I loved hearing that yesterday or 2 days ago when we were talking, because it's an inspirational thing, man. Like, you did something with it. You had an open door and you walked right through it, which I think is awesome. And then it leads to all this cool stuff. And I have a question from Facebook that came in. So if you're watching on Facebook Live and you've got a question for Michael, and believe me, we've got a lot to pack in here in an hour, because there's not only is his artwork ridiculously awesome, his inspiration is ridiculously awesome. And Michael, we've got a question. So Chuck, in his cartoons, he directed Tom and Jerry. Do you have a favorite Tom and Jerry cartoon? That's called putting you on the spot.
Honestly, I'll admit I was I never followed Tom and Jerry's diligently as I did Looney Tunes. The Tom and Jerry episodes I always remember the most were all of the ones with all of the ones with that cantankerous bulldog. But yeah, there's not a specific Tom and Jerry that leaps out as something that I remember like gravitating towards in quite that same way that Duck Dodgers like kind of grabbed out and reached me.
Yep, I totally understand. I had kind of the same thing when I found out that Chuck was, when I saw his name on the credits at first, and I was used to Looney Tunes. That was when I was a kid, that was like, he does this too?
Yeah, so, I remember being surprised by that.
Yes, and I'm like, and pleasantly surprised, because they're good. So as we get into, and thank you for the question on Facebook. Again, if you have them, please go ahead and pop a question, and they'll pipe it to us, and we'll ask Michael. So you get this kick, right? You do these miniature paintings, you start selling some stuff, you get noticed, you're putting this degree that you had to work, that you knew you wanted to be in some form and fashion, right? And it starts to open up, and you're painting people and you're doing things. And how do you go from, and I loved your explanation on this, how did you go from like what you were doing early on to animals and robots? How did that evolve?
It was yeah, it was definitely kind of a slow and funny process. You know, if you looked at the first work I was showing in galleries, you wouldn't necessarily look at that and assume that it was the same artist as what I create today. It had a lot of people and really detailed backgrounds, and so I was, yeah, creating these pieces. But because my painting style is so crisp and tight, anytime I paint a person, it's very obvious that that is a painting of somebody. Like, there's no, you know, with a looser, more gestural painting, you can kind of imagine yourself or somebody in that image. But that didn't work with my paintings. And I remember like fairly often talking to collectors and them kind of getting caught on like trying to guess who the character was in the painting, like being like, oh, is that, naming some celebrity, and be like, no, that's my friend's sister, like, you know, or whatever. Like somebody, like a couple of times I had people come in and be like, oh man, I absolutely love this painting, but that looks like my ex-wife, and if I hung that in my house, you know, my current wife would kill me.
Like, what is she doing on the wall? I don't know. I just love the painting and I bought it. It has nothing to do with her.
Yeah, so I like, animals were often kind of secondary characters in my paintings, and I realized people were able to identify more with the animals and empathize with the animals as characters more without any preconceived notions, because nobody has a story about an elephant that was a jerk to them in high school or something like that.
Or if they do, that is one weird twist.
Yeah. Yeah, that is some interesting stories, and I want to hear about where you grew up. But yeah, so animals just started becoming more prevalent, and the people started becoming less prevalent until, and now I paint them fairly rarely. I feel like, well, and I've always loved animals. I've always, you know, as long as I can remember, I was going to the zoo with a sketchbook from like the time I was tiny. So it was a natural progression, but I just, you know, it was largely because of the way people were interacting with my paintings. I felt like I could say what I wanted to say without people getting kind of stuck on the character and the image.
Mm. And I love that, because I think you're absolutely right. Sometimes you can get stuck on that likeness of something, and that, you know, the meaning that you put into the painting, somebody's taking a little something different, and you can get away with that with animals. And speaking of animals, what I wanted to show, and Scott, if you can pull up Narwhal Study and Fab Friends, we've got exclusive editions releasing tonight. And I want to talk about a little bit of transition of style, right? And we have a question from Facebook, and then, oh, you actually, Scott, can you go back to Michael? Because he's actually holding the painting. And let's take a look at that real quick. So we've got Narwhal Study. I love that piece. I love the color in it. And we've got, this was an exclusive edition. So when you're doing animals, you went from that initial paint drip, right? And things, and we've got a question from Facebook that says, you know, so this is an evolution of style, the rainbow drips. Is it a cool effect, or is it deeper meaning?
It's a lot of times I don't necessarily like, I've got a really vague idea of what I'm trying to say when I'm creating a piece, but a lot of times what it winds up meaning to me isn't clear until after I've gotten deeper into the work. So yeah, like initially the piece, like those rainbow drips were inspired heavily by the graffiti scene from like the you know, early 2000s, where there's that really popular to do these like really detailed semi-realistic images and then just let the paint keep running off of the figures. And so I was just kind of riffing on that by, instead of having the paint running off of the figures, having the paint running down onto the figures and kind of like forming the color and the volume and the shape. But what it wound up, what I wound up realizing, like I was kind of thinking about or trying to say with each piece, was kind of like about how life experience constantly changes you. So anything you see, anything you do, it washes over you and becomes a part of who you are. And that's that idea of kind of like going with that change and letting that become a part of you. You know, like the catnap mural was inspired by a quote, because like I said, like when I'm painting, it's a lot of times for an idea I have that I can't figure out how to verbalize, because I'm a visual artist and I don't always word good. So when I came across this quote by this American philosopher, Reinhold Niebuhr, who said, "Change is the essence of life. You must be willing to sacrifice what you are in order to realize what you can become." And I realized, like, oh yeah, he just succinctly, in so few words, described this entire body of work with this concept that I've been grappling with for like, it had been months at the time when I encountered that.
And you're like, thank you very much, and can I borrow that?
Yeah. I printed it out, I put it above my easel, and I stared at it for 2 weeks, trying to figure out how I was going to specifically illustrate that concept as concisely as he had verbalized it, and catnap was the result.
Which is awesome. And I want to show, we've got some images from your catnap mural, which look awesome. And so we've got that Narwhal Study, we've got Fab Friends, we'll get to, but Mike, or Scott, can you bring up the image of the catnap mural? When you were, so safe to say, you hadn't done a mural before this.
No, that was my first mural.
And it looks fairly large. What's the size of this thing?
It's 18 feet by 18 feet.
18 feet. And correct me if I'm wrong, but this is something that you had entered, and this was, you know, were you going to get it? I don't know, but you were hoping they didn't want a typical beach scene because you didn't want to do that. So this piece is also available, I believe, at bit.ly.michaelsummerstudio.com as a limited. Tell me about, like, so you're going through and you've worked on paintings, and now you want to submit something and create art for people to see. What brought about that want to do a mural in a public space?
Honestly, it was always something I loved the idea behind. You know, I was, as I'd mentioned, heavily influenced by graffiti art, and I loved public art. I loved the idea of being able to share your work in this very public way, where, you know, nobody has to pay anything to see it. Like, everybody can just drive by and see that art. So yeah, it was something that had always appealed to me. This was something that a friend of mine actually kind of badgered me a little bit into doing it. Like, she'd been aware of it and kept saying, like, look, they're putting out a call to artists. You should submit. Your work would be great. And I'd had this set idea that, so I'd kind of looked into public art before, and I'd had this set idea where I'm like, beach communities always just want to see palm trees and woodies and surfboards, and that's not what I paint. So I kept not doing it, and finally she got exasperated with my refusal and, like, just brought me the paperwork and, like, pointed at the top, and it literally, their call to artists literally said, like, we don't want, like, palm trees and surfboards. There's a lot of that. We want something that's kind of unique, a little unexpected, something that kind of grabs attention. And I was like, that kind of sounds like my work. And I had just finished painting the catnap original that was, you know, about 3 feet by 4 feet. And I snapped a photograph of that, and I sent it to the city of Carlsbad, and figured, small odds I'll get it, and if I do get it, then I guess I'll have to figure out how to paint a mural.
So when you got that and you get the call and they're like, yeah, we want this, and you've got kind of a concept in mind, and then you go and was there something that surprised you when you got to the scale of what you were about to accomplish?
Yeah. When they put out the call to artists, they said they were looking for a couple of small murals that were going to be, like, I think they were, like, I don't know, like 3 feet by 4 feet or so, and then, like, a couple of large murals that were going to be about 8 feet by 10 feet. And then when I got there and I saw the wall, I was like,
that's not an 8 by 10.
Yeah, I was like 8. I'm fairly tall, you know, 8 feet. I can kind of lean up and reach that with a brush. Like 18 feet, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna have to figure this out, you know, which the city didn't necessarily expect me to fill that entire space, but I felt like since I had the wall, I didn't want to, like, box out 8 by 10. Like, I was like, if this wall is mine, I'm going to use as much of it as I can.
So did you have to figure out scaffolding? Were you up just super high on a ladder and you were hoping someone was holding the base?
That was a ladder, and I painted everyone. Like, my drips I create the illusion to try and make it look like they're dripped, but even, like, on my small originals, every one of those drips is mid-tone, shadow, highlight. So the day I painted those drips was me going up an 18-foot ladder, and for every drip painting mid-tone, shadow, highlight. And
yeah.
The next day I was like, I I can't feel my calves.
Yeah, 18 feet is not a small feat for sure to get up there on a ladder and then hold a brush and it takes
Yeah, it was, I mean, it was so much fun. Like creating that was such a positive experience. But yeah, it was because I'd never done it before. Like every single aspect of it was me going, all right, now how am I going to do this? and then tackling it.
which I think you did a pretty darn remarkable job of that, because not only is it a feat, but the mural itself jumps right off the wall. Like we've got a picture we're showing right now, and well, there you go. You can see the scale and size. We've got a small child or a small adult, and looking at that piece, that is you can spot that from a long ways away. And I love what you did with the effect over the tigers. I love the fact that you made a limited out of this and you put your stamp on it. How long did that take you to paint?
The actual, from the time that the city of Carlsbad like put permitting through and I was able to start work, it was just 10 work days working Monday through Friday, because I had just kind of started getting momentum in my art career, and so I like every weekend intersecting that I had a show or an event, so I could only work on it Monday through Friday. So yeah, it was 10 days of work, usually putting in about 10 hours a day, give or take.
That's a day, man. Did you have, were you just like hoping that please don't rain, please don't rain?
Oh, so much. Like I was so constantly like, oh man. Like getting there early in the morning and trying to work like before the marine layer had fully burned off when it was nice, you know, and yeah, hoping it didn't rain. And in addition, I spent about a week doing some really careful prep work for it. Like, you know, to recreate the image at that scale, I decided rather than trying to project or grid it on that scale, I would take care of that in my studio. So I made these 3 foot by 5 foot stencils, and yeah.
Yeah, those. Hey, Scott, could you put that up? There you go. So we can get an idea. So you make all these, you hand cut all this stuff.
Yeah, so I hand cut all of the stencils, and that way, when I just used a black spray primer, and that basically became like my underdrawing for the painting. And that way everything, I had already worked out the scale and I knew it was right, and I didn't have to try and figure that out on a busy street with traffic. Like,
Yes, no, I would agree. That's not what you want to do.
yeah, so that, you know, that first bit of image went up on the first day, and considering
Even that, so like I get like a Banksy feel, you know, a little bit. I don't, you know, like you're this dude undercover at night, and all of a sudden tigers appear.
you know, it's funny. Like I said, you know, I was invited by the city, but when I was working on it, I always remember this. Like so many people were so nice. People were like bringing me pizza and like, you know, bringing me coffee and stuff while I was working. But
Like
I remember
you had random people bringing you stuff.
yeah, just random people. Like I was there like every day, and people started coming by and they were enjoying the work, and so people would be like, they'd go across the street to the pizza joint and they'd just come back and be like, hey man, we grabbed you a couple slices, or be like, hey, I grabbed some coffee, like thanks. Like everyone was awesome.
That
It was
is
so much fun.
amazing.
But I remember these like, you know, kind of pseudo delinquent like kids showed up on skateboards with like backpacks full of rattle cans, like obviously like your local taggers. And you know, they just started talking to me about the painting, and I was talking about like my influences and how much I love graffiti art, and how this was kind of like, you know, my first chance to kind of get to do like some public art. And you know, I just talked to them like they were people instead of, you know, chasing them away or assuming they were hoodlums, because, you know, most folks are fairly decent if you take the time to talk to them. And so yeah, I was talking to them for about an hour, and after about an hour, they're like, "Hey, well, thanks for taking the time to talk to us." They're like, "We'll go ahead and tell our friends to make sure that nobody tags this," uh, and nobody has.
Yeah.
And then on top of it, they were like, "So do you need somebody to look out for the cops for you? Because we've got boards, so we can mount on the corners and let you know and let you know if the police are coming."
You're like, no, dude, I swear it's legit.
Yeah, and I was
That's
like,
awesome.
yeah, I was like, man, I seriously like that warmed my heart in such a serious way. Yeah. But I was like, no, I'm actually supposed to be here, but thanks.
That's awesome, man. You know, and those little moments that you have with, especially when you're creating something, and the fact that you can have an impact, because you never know what they're going to do with it, and that's kind of the beauty of it, right? They take something and you poured in some time, and you came back the next day, and there wasn't a top hat and a magic cane with your tiger, so there was a successful non-tagging of your work. But I think I love that, and you know, especially everyone that we've had on the creative side chat, there's always been moments where you find out a little bit more about the artist, and you know, I love those stories from you on just taking the time to spend with people, especially when you can tell that it's something they're interested in, and they see you doing this thing on a grand scale that you're supposed to do, and man, look what you could do. So I think that's awesome, and so. I gotta ask you, like, as you go from tigers and murals and animals, you get into robots, right? And before you get into this story on like how this character came about, could you do me, like, we could have nerded out for an hour and you could have shown me everything in that case. But could you take one of your cameras and pan into the morning inspiration case? So, and you correct me if I'm wrong as you're panning over to the case. This is like where we're pop culture nerds, and so in that vein of pop culture nerdness, you've got this wicked cabinet full of, like, I kept going through all the characters, and tell me if I'm wrong, but you kind of sit there and absorb a bit of inspiration each morning.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, yeah, this is kind of my museum of nerd, and it's just kind of a collection of like every pop culture like property that influenced and inspired me, and all of the things from the time when I was young that made me want to create, made me want to, like, make my own worlds and create these images. Um, so yeah, I pretty much every morning, like, I wake up and I make myself a cup of coffee, and I'll sit down for a good hour in the morning and just kind of stare at the space and looking at all of these things that inspired me when I was young, and use that to kind of like feed my inspiration for the day, and and kind of like help me kind of get charged and in that right mindset to remember why it is that I wanted to create.
Dude, I'm still nerding out over all the stuff that you have in here, and this goes to show you, kids and adults, just because you get older doesn't mean you have to grow up. And I didn't even see the AT-AT last time. Oh, come on now.
Yeah, that's my original from when I was, I don't know, I think I got that for my ninth Christmas or eighth Christmas or whatever.
So here's an awesome Chuck tie-in to this part of your cabinet specifically. Like George Lucas credits Chuck Jones with, like, as being a creative influence on him. So look at how we've tied it all together today, right in your inspiration case.
Right. It's awesome. Honestly, I didn't even realize that. That
Yep.
makes me happy to know.
He did. Yeah, Chuck had an influence on George, and look what came out of all that fantasticness. I love this case. I think it's awesome, man. And I don't think there's not one artist that I know that doesn't have stuff like this. I mean, maybe not to this degree, but like we've got all over. I love the minions. I didn't even see those last time.
Yeah, I've got so, like I said, anything that's ever inspired me or made me want to create.
So we've got, and I love your Captain America because I have the suit behind me that I wear, but you made your Captain America, which, and if we're being honest, like Captain America, the First Avenger is my #2 favorite MCU film, and I love the way it was done. And that figure of your Captain America reminds me of that film.
Yeah, that was why I made it. He was always been my favorite superhero. I loved how well the movie captured like what it was that I liked about that character. And I didn't think any of the action figures that existed quite did him justice. So being the nerd that I am, I kind of kit bashed my own version to make the one that I thought they should have made the toy of.
So I'm just gonna tell you, man, I salute your diligence and your nerdness in that, and I elevate you to whatever the next level is because that's freaking awesome. So as we get through these, I can see the Hellboy over there too. As we get through and like your inspiration cabinet, and you know you've got some robotic figures in here. And by the way, we've got who I'd like to say is one of my new best friends, who saw your mural in person and said it was awesome. And I won't give any hints other than the fact that his name begins with an F. What's up, buddy? So we get into like the inspiration camp. You got a lot of stuff going on there. How does this robot figure, and I love how it developed. So I would love for people to know how that developed. And as we're telling that story, Scott Ryder's got some images of your character here. And correct me if I'm wrong, but this image specifically, so if you go to bit.ly/Michael Summers Studio, was this inspired by Phil Collins?
Yeah, that was absolutely.
Sorry, can we like give us a little lead into how you created this robotic like character, and then how did Phil Collins and you know like what the effect it had? Because that was a question we had come in even before the show started. We had somebody be like, "You got to ask him about this."
Yeah. Now the robot characters, just kind of this amalgamation of a bunch of different ideas, but largely centered around kind of like he's a little bit of a self-portrait and a reminder to myself to not get too caught up in synthetic experiences. You know, in our modern age, you can be like, I want to see a sunset, and you can pull up a sunset on your phone and watch it instantly in like 2 inches by 3 inches. It's my reminder to not just watch things or consume things, but to actually physically go out and do them. So I liked this idea of this robot that should be this automaton that just has a function, but instead of him performing his function or being defined by a job, I always have him doing these visceral kinds of experiences where like I always want to create this kind of image of him doing something that's expressing like joy or creativity. And yeah, so I kind of had the idea, like I listen to music often when I'm painting, and it's another large source of inspiration. So the concept of the robot bands evolved kind of naturally, but when I started laying them out, like when I was doing like the first pencil sketches, like when I got to the drummer, I just heard that In the Air Tonight drum solo that and that just kept playing through my head every time like I looked at the image.
Which and I love that explanation of like non-synthetic, right? And just detaching yourself from that and being in the environment that you're in. I think that's awesome. And what I love too that you mentioned as you kind of made that little segue here, which I wanted to segue into, which was that moment that you decided that this is what it's going to be full time. You're going to put the work in. So, even in the mural you were mentioning, you go to your day job, you come do this, you go do that, you go do this. And what was that moment like when you made the commitment to say, I'm gonna, like, I've got some momentum here, things are going, this is what I really want to do, and I'm gonna do it. Like, what happened at that moment, and then what did you tell yourself? Like, how much time did you give yourself to say, I'm gonna give myself this much time, and I'm gonna pour everything I got into it. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, it was honestly like a couple years after my first show. So I'd had my first show, and it went well, and then I was kind of showing and doing different events and gallery shows and pop-ups, and I'd get a little bit of momentum, and then I'd get busy at work, or I'd have, like, outside life obligations, and I'd kind of lose focus on my art, and then it kind of drift back, and then I'd focus on it again and kind of bring it back, and it was about 3 years of this kind of like start, stop, stuttering, kind of slowly rising, but not really getting major traction. And after 3 years, I decided that if this was what I was going to do, I needed to throw everything I had into it. And because I had a life and I had a full-time job, I knew I couldn't keep up that pace indefinitely. So I gave myself a year. It was January 1st, 2011. I said, this is my New Year's resolution. I'm going to throw everything I have into this. I'm going to run myself ragged. I'm going to pour everything I have into creating and exhibiting and sharing my work. And if at the end of that year nothing's come out of it, then maybe I'm supposed to do something else. And it was about 11 months later, I realized I'd been, working a full-time job, commuting to work, coming back, painting for 5 to 8 hours, doing shows on the weekends. And around like November, December, I started realizing I was calling into work sick fairly often, because it gotten to where the days when I stayed home and painted, I was making a lot more money than the days that I was showing up to work. And I realized that was probably a sign that it was time to take that leap of faith. And so yeah, exactly 1 year, like January 1st, 2012, like exactly 1 year after I'd made that decision, I quit my day job and have been doing this full time since.
And what I really appreciated about, like, when we were just kind of talking about that, and by the way, if you see the link, the bit.ly/Michael Summers Studio, things are being bid on at a furious pace, just to let you know, Sir Summers. You guys can take a look at his exclusive editions, which is the Narwhal Study and the Fab Friends, as well as the 3 Chuck inspired pieces. And the limited edition that we have of Planet X. So, what I loved about what you had mentioned, and you look at the body of work, and I mean, look at even what's on the site of what you created, and just the amount, and I know that's a small amount of the large catalog that you put together over the years. But what stuck with me, and what's been great about doing these Creativeside chats too, is the little nuggets that come out, and you put in the work. And you made that statement even when we were talking, about your friends who are, and I get it. I know how, because I have the same, like, oh, you do your own thing. Oh, you can do whatever you want. No.
Right.
Do whatever I want. I'm probably not eating next week. So, this is a job, and you look at it as a job. And what I really respected amongst the amount that I respected is that statement that you had made of, you're putting in the 12-hour days, and you're doing what needs to be done. You're creating. Just because it's art doesn't mean it's like this thing that just comes and happens. Like, you get to make a living doing what you're doing because you put the work in. And that work ethic, I think, it shows in the work that you do. And, I have a great respect for that, just in your talent, but as well as what you do to continually move that forward. So, do you find that people, like, sometimes, and usually it's not just people, it's your friends that are like, oh, you can do whatever, let's go on. You find that misconception of like, it's just easy.
Yeah. No, yeah, that's something I catch from a lot of my friends. Like anytime there's a social gathering or an event that everybody's attending, and I'm like, yeah, I can't. I've got deadlines or commissions or something like this. And I was like, no, what are you talking about? They're like, you're your own boss. Like, I literally had a friend who was like, you just roll out of bed at the crack of noon, pour yourself a scotch, and paint a rainbow tiger and call it a day. I was like, man, if only that was exactly how my days actually looked, because that would be awesome.
Yeah.
Like, it's funny because, I am doing what I love, and I am my own boss. So my schedule is, flexible to a degree, but it's it's a labor of love, but it's a very labor intensive labor of love.
Yes.
So I work longer, harder hours now than I ever had working for anyone else in my entire life. And that's, partially by choice, and partially just the nature of being a creative. Like, that's yeah, it requires that you be willing to pour everything you have into it. You have to put a lot into it to make it work, and it's,
well,
it's so rewarding, it's so worth it.
Absolutely. Well, you can tell just the level of, the level of prep, the level of study, that you do just to get to, before you even paint a piece, all the work that goes in to work on your craft. I kind of equate it to like an athlete, right? The better you train, the harder you train, the better you get. And if you don't do any of that stuff, and just like an artist and a creative, the more you train yourself, the more you, inspire yourself around and do and practice, the better you get. And it's a lot of hard work to keep that up. So big applause to you on that. What I wanted to tell everybody too, before I don't forget, is that the auction does close at 7 p.m. Pacific time, so that's in about 2 hours. And it's been cool to see what that your book, because I enjoyed seeing when you guys were like kind of showing that around. And if anybody, and correct me if I'm wrong, if anybody, and I'm watching bids being placed right now on your stuff on the Altria site. So I have that up on one screen, and I'm watching the alerts that keep going off. So you've got this wicked book that you put together, and which is, yes, go Vanna White for me. And as we're flipping through pages, we've got the mural, the catnap mural. You got all kinds of goodies in here. It's a fantastic book that you did of the work that you've done. If anybody buys a non-open edition, right, so a limited or an original, they get this. They get one of these copies, and I'll let you tell them what you are going to do.
Yeah. So anybody who grabs a limited edition or original, I'll throw in one of the books and add a custom little sketch on the front under the umbrella. And if you're wanting a dedication, provide me names, and I'll add a dedication or anything you might want on the inside as well.
I think that's awesome, dude. Like, that is a very generous gift for anybody that's purchased. So all the bids that I'm watching right now, if you're winning these bids on the Altria site, you're going to get one of these on the limiteds or an original. So Michael, I've got to ask you, as you go from the paint drips and that style, and that's very iconically you, and then you look at Narwhal, right, the Narwhal study, and that you find that evolution as things start to evolve for you as an artist, and I love that, because we all do that, right? Everybody evolves. And do you find it a little bit difficult to let a little bit of that go and to try something new, or is it experimental? And by the way, everybody needs to see your like paint setup and your art desk thing. So we've got the Narwhal study up right now. So if you want to just flip that camera, I geeked out over your setup. How does the evolution of Michael Summers come about, where you go from more of the paint drip style to what you're doing now in Narwhal State? Look at that. Good night. That's gorgeous. Like I gotta tell you, man, like just the paper trays, and then the fact that you have like a custom built Lazy Susan for your paint.
Yeah, I was honestly pretty lucky on that. It was designed and built custom for an artist by a collector of mine who's a woodworker, and the other artist moved studios and didn't have room for it anymore, and so the collector reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you by any chance have any space for this?" And I was like, yes, please.
Yes, and it's on wheels. Double yes.
Yeah, I try to have as much of my rig on wheels as possible. I like being able to just move my easel, move my desks, move everything around.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So it's what I love about going into other artist studios, is we get to take a look at what we normally wouldn't get to take a look at, which is all the stuff you do to make things happen and all the cool things in there. When I saw that today and I saw that in the background, I'm like, oh, we got to show that, because that's just awesome. And I love the fact that I love all the colors and how you like organize them. I'm like, oh, like that fulfills my OCD.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's funny. So I'm not OCD about a lot, but my art is the one area where it all comes out.
And that's okay. That's all right. So speaking of the art and getting into that transition, that kind of evolution of style, how, what brought about this kind of change a little bit, as you clearly still using that color that you're known for, right? And then you're just applying it differently and you pull off Narwhal Study.
It's funny, like I try often to make time to always just kind of experiment, and like, I honestly have like a fair number of pieces lying around that just didn't work out. And that was something honestly that this quarantine kind of forced me to sit back and spend a lot of time in my studio, because I'd been doing lots of shows and lots of events, and I kind of like couldn't go anywhere for a while. So after going stir crazy for about a week, then I decided that this would be a great time to kind of start getting back to that experimental process that I'd kind of kept going. Yeah, I'll do that later, but I'd been so busy that I hadn't really had a chance to do it. So I just used this as an opportunity to go ahead and kind of give myself permission to fail at a painting. Like I don't know if this will work, but I'm going to see what happens. And sometimes you get something that's really neat. Like I had no idea whether that Narwhal Study would work at all or not, but I was really happy with the outcome. And
yeah, I think we're all very happy with the outcome, because it looks amazing.
Thanks so much.
A real quick segue here, a break-in, a rabbit hole, if you will. Jason Howard on Facebook wants to know if you built the SDF-1.
No, I have not put that together. I think monstrous. It's like 4 feet long. I don't have any room for it if I assembled it.
So for now, it's the box is good. The box is good.
It's the box for now. Yeah. Good eye.
I'm like, I see, like we all do the same thing. We're like, as we're watching and looking at stuff, we're like, oh my gosh, he's got that over there. So, as we come to the top of the hour, and where everybody, if you're a reminder, the bidding for the bit.ly/Michael Summers Studio closes in 2 hours. I'm watching the alerts as I keep getting pinged with bids on your exclusives tonight, which I did want to mention one more time. And Scott Ryder, if you can show what we've got for the limiteds and the Chuck inspired pieces. We got the Hold the Tiger with bugs. So icon meets icon in one painting. and this is the outpouring. Love that. We've got Robin Hood Daffy, which still, and it took me a second on this right before he showed to be like, oh, you painted all the notes on the side too. I love that. Again, top 5 favorites. Linda Jones, it's her favorite film. There you go, Michael Summers. You have painted her favorite film. And Planet X. So this is an original and limiteds. There's a limited number of limiteds on Planet X. And then we've got the exclusive tonight on the Narwhal Study and the Fab Friends. So Narwhal Study, which is Michael's experimentation gone gloriously in a new direction with some, I love the color, man. I really do. I think it's fantastic. I love the fact that you gave yourself time to just figure it out regardless of what happened, because I find that difficult. I find it difficult to be like, what if I mess up?
Me too.
And then you hold yourself back, you know, and look at what you did when you just kind of let it all go. And I'm not going to sing the Frozen song, right? But he let it go. And then do we have Fab Friends too? Yeah, Fab Friends. My kids love penguins and loved this when they saw it on my screen before we got going. Daddy, it's got elephants and penguins. And I'm like, I know, elephants and penguins are your favorite. So these
Awesome.
are specific exclusive editions for tonight. By the way, Planet X's are almost gone. So congratulations, dude. That's flying off the shelf.
Wow. Awesome.
Yeah. It's. I love getting notes while things are going and be like, look at that. Be like, that's cool. And then I get to tell you and be like, yeah. So that's kind of rocking. So,
Nice.
you know, Michael, as you look, you know, and as you mentioned, like this whole crazy 6 months that we've gone through so far, which is hard to believe it's been 6 months already.
Right.
There are plenty of silver linings to it, you know, and I think one that you had mentioned was just giving yourself the opportunity that you normally wouldn't have to try something different and to allow yourself to fail. I think that translates to anybody, anywhere doing anything, not just art. And the fact that you're allowing yourself to do those things, do you, as you kind of, and obviously like, I have no idea what's going to happen by the end of the month, but as you kind of look forward to these things, is there stuff that you're kind of like on a wish list that you're like, really like to experiment with this, you know, and you know, or like something in the mind that as you kind of look through, like, man, I'd love to tackle. Why?
Yeah, I've honestly been really inspired by a lot of retro sci-fi art, you know, which is fairly apparent, like with my Clockwork Man, but I haven't really branched into a lot more of it. And I've been really liking those like sleek, like kind of art deco lines and aesthetics of like sci-fi art from the, you know, the early golden age of science fiction. And I've got a sketchbook that I've just been filling up with all of these doodles, but I haven't really tackled yet in terms of like figuring out how to apply color or how to bring that world into my world in the vision that I'm kind of only nebulously seeing it in my mind at the moment, and I haven't really locked that vision in, but I'm still kind of playing and experimenting in that area, and really been enjoying that process.
So you said a magic word, and it happened to be sketchbook. Now, I'm not going to say you have to show anything, right? Because maybe you don't. But if you wanted to show a couple of pages of sketchbook, the Michael Summers sketchbook, I nerd out on this stuff. And I'm pretty sure there's a bunch of people, the 56,742 on Facebook, that want to see. I mean, just, you know, don't worry about the number of people. We're fine. It's just you and me. So nobody else is watching. If we showed.
I've got, honestly, it's funny, like, my paintings are so meticulous, and my sketchbooks, more often than not, they're like scribbled little shorthands, like vague little ideas that are something just to remind me to come back to an idea. Like, they're not necessarily, you wouldn't necessarily look at a lot of my sketches and even assume that that I knew how to paint or sometimes even draw. Like, some of them are so just goofy and have nothing to do with Nothing to do with the rest of my work. My my self-portrait avatar. I've always had a strong affinity for donkeys. Yeah. So yeah. Sometimes I've got like more detailed, nuance like studies, like when I have an actual piece in mind. Like this was for a lemur commission I recently did. Um, yeah, but then fairly often I just have these random little scribbles that are just kind of these shorthand notes.
That's awesome. Yeah, don't sell yourself short. The sketches are friggin' cool, man.
Yeah, but I mean, a lot of them are really just barely even anything.
It's just enough for you to get the thought out, and then there you go.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, I wanted, they're going to give me the hook, and it's going to be Daffy off the stage. Not that, I mean, it's not like a hard deadline, right? If we wanted to go longer, we could, I'm sure, and then I'll get told no.
Yeah,
but we had
we need the tour of your studio. Like I'm nerding out on the background there, and I'm like.
So there was when we had that. There's a moment like as you kind of connect with people on stuff, and yeah, so when we started discussing and when I saw the stuff that was in your cabinet, I'm like, oh. So we can get to that at some point, but I wear that suit. So it's not as like I'm more into if I had the the Captain America First Avenger shoot, and that shield is straight up metal, which you saw on the last time. And then I've got Mjolnir, which is 13 pounds, and Iron Man, and there's Batman and everything all around it. Yeah, at some point, you and I can just do the tour of each other's stuff, and
yeah, let's do that and really nerd out on it all, because yeah, I could definitely go into more depth than I think. I could easily overestimate my audience's curiosity when it comes to this stuff.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe not. Like mine, I could go on for days. But yeah, you and I will have to like tour each other's stuff, and I could show you all kinds of things. And then there's all kinds of stuff that I saw too in the cabinet. I'm like, I can't ask that right now. I just have to wait. So I just wanted to say thank you for doing this, and why I think this is such an important thing for anybody watching is. We're in a very different time of things, and what it's like I said, silver linings, and what has come out of that is the necessity to do something different, right? And would we have ever have thought to do a lot of these, like we're doing now, that's not a traditional gallery show or not a traditional event, or exhibition or something outdoors? Probably not. And what this gives us the ability to do is to go into and meet you and just have a candid conversation. We don't have tons of people around, you can't always have that get to know you kind of thing. And I love this about these because we get to know the artists. And I think something that has always been very important to me, I firmly believe as an artist that you should collect other artists. It's not something that you see and be like, oh, I could do that and paint that. No, why would you do that? Somebody else did. And have a healthy appreciation. I have a whole collection of people that I collect. And, and I love getting to know people like you and seeing what goes in behind the work, because I have more of an emotional connection from you explaining what goes into things, and I get it, and that connects with me. And I think that's connected with our audience even more so as well, as I keep seeing the ping go off on the bidding stuff, right? And I think, I love to hear what you have going behind things, that there's purpose in meeting. And I love the fact that you're not afraid to put the work in. And in a very short amount of time between the 1 hour that we had on Tuesday and today, I've got I've grown very quickly to have a very healthy respect for you as an artist, but just as a person in general, right? It takes a lot to do this, and it takes a lot of fortitude, and you're doing it, man. You're doing what you want to do, making a living, doing it. You're putting the work in, and it inspires me. That I'm not kidding when you had made that point of, I work harder now than I did when I had a job working for somebody else, and I do it. We know those kind of things, but to hear it, especially from someone who is as successful as you are and talented and just down to earth, it's a reinforcement. And I think it's something everybody needs to hear. So I just want to say, I cannot appreciate you enough for agreeing to do this and come on. I've absolutely loved getting to know you up to, you know, just even a little bit that we have. I am very much looking forward to the cross studio tour and nerding out on stuff. And I want to let people know that the bit.ly /Michael Summers Studio is where you can bid. It's the Octria site. You can bid on the work right now. If you buy a limited edition or an original, Michael has that wicked art of book that he did, and he will doodle something on the front specific for you and then give the names he'll dedicate on the inside. That's an awesome gift, by the way, man. And parting words, as I say, thank you very much. What would you like to say to the audience as we close it out?
I just want to thank folks for, you know, taking the time to join us here. This was a lot of fun to get to actually kind of show the space that I work in and get to share a little bit with my techniques, and thank you so much for you know, kind of keeping this flowing, because I have a tendency to kind of lose track or ramble occasionally. You kind of did a good job of keeping me on track, which I appreciate. But yeah, everybody who came out, thank you so much for spending the time. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed looking at the work. And to everybody who decided to bring a piece home, thank you so much. I really appreciate everyone whose support allows me to keep doing this. Like, I'm really fortunate to be able to do this for a living, and I appreciate so much everybody who will take the time out of their day to attend an event, and then like actually make the commitment to make one of my works a part of their home.
Absolutely. Well, there is so much good stuff to look at for people to make and take apart today, and I'm glad that people have. I'm glad that you have that support, dude, because you're a talented guy and you're just a down-to-earth, awesome guy. And I believe in that human factor first. So thank you so much. It's been an absolute pleasure, man. I look forward to more and exciting things. And I hope you have a great evening, sir. And to our audience on Facebook Live and to our Zoom audience, thank you so much for joining in. I hope you've gotten some nugget out of this Chuck Jones Creativeside chat as well, from the legendary, the heroic, if you will, Michael Summers. So have a great night, everybody, and we will see you next time.
Good night.